In the 1100s, the role of women, particularly good Christian women, was greatly restricted. If you wanted to serve God, you had two basic ways to do it. You could be a nun or a good wife. The convent would seem to be the obvious choice, but the problem was that that was also where any woman who might be causing a scandal was sent. So the convents were a mix of those who really wanted to serve God and those who really wanted to live really not at all honoring God, but got shipped there anyway because their dad was rich and wanted to hide a scandal. And even once in a convent, nuns at that time were shunted aside, that they weren't allowed to go out and serve among the poor or anything like that, because women were not only considered the weaker sex, they were considered temptresses. So the church leadership didn't want women out in the world because they didn't want to risk women contaminating everything else. So even women who became nuns didn't have a chance to really serve in the community, but were forced to the contemplative life instead of a life of service. And yet, at the same time, the Crusades were in full swing. Europe was empowered and on fire to find ways to serve God. And the men had that way. They could go and fight and die in the Crusades. They could give their life for God. Literally, they felt. And the women were just as fired up as the men were. They were just as looking for some way to devote themselves to God as the men were. But the problem was that those same crusades meant that there were way fewer men than there were women because they kept dying. And so there were fewer women that could get married. More women had to be forced into a convent. And the convents didn't have enough room, so they started raising their prices. Only the most wealthy women could serve God, it seemed. Enter the Beguines. Starting in the Netherlands somewhere in the 1100s, women began to band together, live together in community, live together in each other's houses, and work as lay people to serve God. But these women were not nuns. While they did agree to live celibate as long as they were part of the community, they took no vows. They could leave anytime they wanted. These women also supported themselves by creating their own industries. Within these communities, they created jobs and businesses of women selling to women so that they could support themselves. Also, in no way were these women removed from society. They had dedicated their lives to God, yes, but to them that involved serving the poor and the sick and the needy and the other women who were surrounding them. Very quickly, communities of these women sprung up all over Northern Europe until almost every major city center had one. Sometimes numbering in the thousands of Beguines in one community. They were sharing houses, resources, looking after each other, mentoring each other, leading each other into being dedicated, holy women of God. They were what they felt nuns should have been. And they did it really well. And this is in a male-dominated society with no man in charge over them. In fact, no men were even involved in the process. The Beguines were so successful that there was a male version of them that started, but they were the ones who came up with it. And in the process of living in community with each other, they redefined what a Christian looked like. They redefined what a woman could do. They redefined what it meant to dedicate your life to God. And they redefined what you could do without being clergy. In a time where you needed to go to God through the priesthood, there were no men around to lead them. And only men could be priests. So they developed a very mystic form of theology that focused on the spiritual union that we can have with Christ as the bride of Christ. They rediscovered the ability to commune directly and intimately with God without anybody else standing between them and Jesus. And they brought faith away from intricate theological musings where it had been held and brought it back into an intimate, personal relationship that changes their lives and leads them to go out and do great things. They paved the way for the societal and religious changes that were coming down the path, because it showed how powerful and amazingly effective women could be when they are given free rein to live out their passion and their calling to God. They showed what a community of Christians looking out for each other should look like. Unfortunately, however, this demonstration in the power of women got the church really nervous. I mean, women roaming the streets without a man to guide them, women making decisions, running businesses, living their lives, living together? How scandalous. Pretty soon they started pressuring the Beguines. They started labeling them as heretics. They started trying to shut them down until in 1310, they burned one of the Beguine leaders at the stake for heresy. This put a damper on the entire thing. And the self-sufficient, God-fearing, poor-helping, woman-led movement of the 1200s disappeared from view. But not without causing cracks all throughout Northern Europe. Cracks that would continue to spread until they ruptured into the Reformation. It's just too bad that even today, some Christians want to ignore the Beguines, and they look with suspicion on any woman who has authority or who has a call to serve God. I wish we'd learned the lesson a little better. As always, thank you for watching. Have a great day. See you next video.